The morning air was crisp, painted with the soft gold of sunrise. I stepped onto my porch, cradling a steaming mug of coffee in both hands, enjoying the quiet hum of my neighborhood. The world was still waking up. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine across my yard, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. Then I heard it. "Excuse me." Her voice cracked through the calm like a whip. I looked up, startled, to see Karen, our self-appointed HOA watchdog, marching across the sidewalk with a clipboard clutched to her chest. Her lips were pursed, her stride sharp, like a judge entering a courtroom. "You can't do that," she said. I blinked. "Do what?" She gestured toward my coffee mug as though it were contraband. "Drink that, out here. In the front yard." I almost laughed, convinced it was a joke, but her expression was carved in stone. She wasn't joking. Karen thrust a paper toward me, a pre-written violation notice already signed at the bottom. As per HOA guidelines, front yards must remain free of unsightly behaviors. Drinking beverages outside is not permitted. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Unsightly behavior? It's just coffee. Her eyes narrowed. "Rules are rules. This is your official notice. Repeat offenses will incur fines." The absurdity hit me like a slap. A fine for drinking coffee in my own yard? The quiet moment I had been savoring was shattered, replaced by a storm of indignation. Neighbors peeked through blinds, their silhouettes faint in the windows. A couple walking their dogs slowed down, whispering. The entire street seemed to hold its breath. I felt a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. My yard was neat, my lawn trimmed, flowers blooming along the walkway. I wasn't disturbing anyone. This wasn't about coffee. It was about control. I took a deliberate sip, staring her in the eye. "Then find me," I said, voice steady. "But I'm not moving." Karen's nostrils flared. She scribbled something on her clipboard with dramatic flourish and spun on her heel. "This will not end well," she hissed, disappearing back down the street like a general retreating to plan her next strike. I stood frozen on the porch, the taste of coffee suddenly bitter. Behind me, my front door creaked as my spouse stepped out. Concern etched across their face. What was that about? I glanced at the paper still fluttering in my hand. A violation notice, over coffee. That's when I realized this was just the beginning. By noon, word had spread across the neighborhood. The violation notice, still lying on my kitchen counter, felt less like paper and more like a spark, one that was already catching fire. When I stepped outside again, the atmosphere was different. My neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, was trimming his hedges across the street. He raised an eyebrow and called out, "Heard Karen's at it again. What did she get you for this time?" I hesitated, almost embarrassed to say it aloud. "Coffee." He froze mid-trim. "Coffee? In your own yard?" His laugh boomed across the street. "That's a new one." Before long, Mrs. Alvarez came by with her little dog, shaking her head. She cited me last month for having a garden gnome, said it was too whimsical. It was clear Karen's crusade wasn't aimed at me alone. She had turned the HOA into her personal kingdom. Every neighbor had a story. A misplaced trash can, curtains deemed the wrong shade, even a flag that wasn't aesthetically pleasing. But what chilled me most was how people reacted. Some laughed about it, sure, but others whispered their complaints, nervous eyes darting toward Karen's house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was as if speaking too loudly might summon her. Later that afternoon, my spouse and I sat on the porch again, coffee mugs in hand, almost defiantly this time. That's when Karen reappeared. She wasn't alone. 2 other HOA board members trailed behind her, like soldiers backing up their commander. "You were warned," Karen declared, pointing at me with a flourish that reminded me of a courtroom drama. "Now you're in violation twice. That's a $100 fine." One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. "Karen, maybe we should—" "Rules are rules," she snapped, silencing him. I rose from my chair, heart pounding but words steady. "Show me where it says coffee is forbidden. Show me in the bylaws." Her lips tightened. For the first time, hesitation flickered across her face. She flipped through her clipboard, shuffling papers with exaggerated authority. But she didn't pull out the bylaws. Neighbors were gathering now. Some leaned on fences, others stood on driveways, watching like an audience waiting for the next act in a play. And in that silence, I realized Karen thrived on intimidation. But without the crowd's compliance, she was just a woman with a clipboard. "Until you prove it's against the rules," I said firmly, "I'll drink coffee right here, every morning." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. With a sharp motion, she gathered her entourage and stormed away, but not before hissing over her shoulder, "This isn't over." No, it certainly wasn't. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to push light over the rooftops as I sat on the porch, coffee mug in hand, waiting. Sure enough, blinds twitched, and I caught the unmistakable silhouette of Karen peering from her window. She was watching, waiting for me to slip up, to give her more ammunition. But I wasn't going to be caught off guard this time. Later that day, I walked down to the community center where the HOA stored its documents. The place smelled of old paper and faint mildew, with binders stacked high on metal shelves. A volunteer looked at me curiously when I asked to see the official HOA bylaws. "Karen didn't send you, did she?" the woman asked cautiously. "No," I said. "I just want to see the rules myself." She handed me a thick binder, its spine cracked from years of use. I flipped through the pages at a table near the window, scanning section after section. Parking regulations, lawn care, architectural guidelines. But nowhere, absolutely nowhere, did it say anything about drinking beverages in one's front yard. So what was Karen playing at? As I highlighted passages with my phone camera, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Looking for something?" I turned. It was one of the board members who'd stood behind Karen the day before, the nervous one. He looked around, lowered his voice and said, "She's creative with the rules. Most of us don't agree with her, but she keeps people scared. No one challenges her." "Why not?" I asked. He sighed. "She threatens to fine us. She files complaints. Sometimes she even sends letters to employers. People just don't want the hassle." That was when the weight of it hit me. This wasn't just about coffee. It was about fear. A single person had turned the HOA into her stage, and the neighborhood into her audience. I thanked him and left with copies of the bylaws in my bag. Walking home, I rehearsed what I would say when Karen inevitably showed up again. This time I wouldn't just stand my ground. I'd expose her bluff. When I turned the corner onto my street, I saw her. Karen was already waiting at the edge of my yard, clipboard in hand like a sheriff in an old western. "You again," she said coldly, "still breaking the rules." I set my coffee cup on the porch railing, pulled the binder from my bag, and held it up. "Funny thing," I said. "I read the rules, every page. And guess what? There's nothing in here about coffee." For the first time, Karen's smile faltered. By the following morning, the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. Word had spread quickly. Someone had finally stood up to Karen. I hadn't planned on becoming a symbol of resistance, but as I walked out onto my porch with my coffee, I could feel eyes on me from every direction. Curtains twitched. Garage doors hung open just enough for neighbors to peek through. I sipped slowly, deliberately, and right on cue, Karen arrived. This time she wasn't alone. She had the full HOA board behind her, 5 members in neat polo shirts, each carrying a folder. It felt like a trial. "You've left me no choice," Karen declared, her voice sharp enough to cut through the morning air. "Today, the board will vote on your violation." The crowd thickened. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, drawn like moths to the glow of conflict. I stood tall, binder in hand, heart racing but voice steady. "Before you vote," I said, raising the binder, "you should know the truth. I've read every page of these bylaws. There is no rule against drinking coffee in one's front yard. Not a single one." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face reddened. She snapped, "Then you must have overlooked the addendum." "Which addendum?" I countered. "Show it to us." The board members glanced at one another, uneasy. One of them whispered, "Karen, maybe—" But Karen silenced him with a glare. She flipped through her clipboard, shuffling pages with frantic hands. The silence of the crowd pressed down, heavy and expectant. Finally, she pulled out a stapled packet, waving it high. "This!" she cried. Guideline Addendum, 47B. Outdoor activities must maintain neighborhood harmony. That includes unsightly behaviors such as loud music, cluttered porches, and yes, beverages in the front yard. The crowd gasped. For a moment, doubt prickled at me. Had she found something real? But as I stepped closer, I saw the pages weren't printed. They were typed in a slightly different font. Margins uneven, no official stamp. I held them up for everyone to see. "This isn't part of the official bylaws. It's a forgery." Gasps turned into whispers, whispers into shouts. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, voice trembling with anger. "She fined me for my garden gnome with that fake rule." One by one, neighbors spoke out. Flags, curtains, even children's bicycles. Violations all tied back to Karen's mysterious addendum. Karen's eyes darted nervously. She opened her mouth to argue, but the board had already seen enough. The nervous member from before finally stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Karen, we need to talk, privately, now." As they pulled her aside, the neighborhood seemed to breathe for the first time in months. But I knew the fight wasn't finished. Not yet. That evening, the cul-de-sac transformed. Where once blinds had been drawn tight and whispers kept low, neighbors now gathered openly. Folding chairs appeared on lawns, children rode bikes freely, and laughter carried through the warm dusk air. For the first time in months, the street felt alive. But Karen's house remained dark, curtains sealed shut like fortress walls. She hadn't emerged since the board had pulled her aside that morning. Rumors spread quickly. Accusations of fabricated rules, demands for accountability. For years, she had wielded fear like a weapon, but now, her power was slipping through her fingers. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, not defiant this time, but content. Mrs. Alvarez strolled by, her little dog trotting happily, and lifted her own mug in solidarity. "To coffee," she said with a smile. "To freedom," I replied. The board called an emergency meeting the next day. This time, it wasn't held in the community center's cramped office, but on the wide, front lawn of Mr. Jenkins's house, where everyone could attend. The turnout was staggering. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to one another in years came together, united by a shared frustration. The board member who'd first confided in me addressed the crowd. His voice was steady, but you could feel the weight of the moment. "We've reviewed the so-called addendums Karen used to issue citations. None of them were official. They were never approved, never recorded. She acted alone." Murmurs of anger rose. People exchanged stories, bogus fines, threats, endless stress, and as the list grew, so did the resolve of the community. Finally, a vote was called. It was swift and unanimous. Karen was removed from her position on the board. The reign of the clipboard was over. When the announcement was made, cheers erupted. Children clapped, neighbors hugged, and someone even popped open a cooler of sodas. The sense of victory wasn't just about Karen. It was about reclaiming the neighborhood, about realizing that fear had kept everyone silent for far too long. As for Karen, she never showed her face that evening. Some said she packed her things and left within the week. Others claimed she still lived there, curtains drawn, bitterness simmering behind the glass. Either way, her days of policing coffee mugs and garden gnomes were done. That night, I sat on my porch again, the quiet returning at last. The coffee was warm, the air cool, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at home in my own front yard. I raised my mug, not just for myself, but for every neighbor who had chosen to stand together. And with that final sip, the battle was over. Enjoying this wild HOA story? Hit subscribe for more real-life neighborhood dramas and funny confrontations. Give this a like if you think sipping coffee in your own yard should always be allowed, and drop a comment. Have you ever had a Karen moment in your neighborhood?